Hello, friends. Welcome to this conversation with Dr. Balaji Srinivasan from IT Madras on Can the Bhagavad Gita help us in exam preparation? So, Dr. Balaji Srinivasan is a faculty member in the Mechanical Engineering Department at IT Madras. I met him many years back at IT Delhi when both of us were faculty members there. I was introduced to him through a common friend. We have had many very interesting conversations on various topics while both of us were in Delhi, and we have also written a paper together, which you see on your screen. I strongly urge you to read that paper. It might be of interest to you. So, in this conversation, we are going to take up Bhagavad Gita, which you know was a conversation between Krishna and Arjuna in the Mahabharata, and we are going to discuss whether it is relevant in today's society, especially in the context of exam preparation. So, welcome, Balaji. Let's start this conversation. Firstly, so to begin with, one question that comes to many people's mind is that Bhagavad Gita was a conversation that took place, like 3,000 or maybe 4,000 years back. That time, society was very different, the education system was very different, students were different, teachers were different. So, is the Gita even relevant in today's society and today's time? What do you think about that?
Uh, Hi, Kushal. So my opinion is that it's a very good question. So my opinion is that having read the Bhagavad Gita several times, Gita, of course, our current conversation is about exam preparation, but in general, it's extremely relevant for life. Okay, so certain things that we can observe about human beings is even though our circumstances change, our nature has not changed by very much. All of us still struggle with the same things, and there is a reason why. Whether it's our culture where we find recourse to Bhagavad Gita, or whether it is Western culture who have their own scriptures, or many people you might have seen today that it's Greek philosophy is very popular today because and humanities are often popular for this very reason. Philosophy is still there, man still struggles with the same questions. The disagreements between parents and children, people with each other, spouses between each other, or communities with communities. This is fairly common, and you will see the roots of that are still common. And Bhagavad Gita, in particular, Gandhiji's opinion was it's posed as a fight between Pandavas and Kauravas, but it represents the struggle of a man with himself, within himself, forces within himself. So every person struggles with something. So to that extent, that till we are facing mental struggles of one form or the other, Bhagavad Gita is relevant to everyone. It's posed also that way. I mean, if you read it carefully, you will see Krishna always looks at the general application of something rather than very specific time-dependent application. It's a brilliant set of 700 verses.
Very true. Very true. Can we also, say it in this sense that, like we have Newton's laws and, principles of Archimedes, which again were discovered many centuries back, but they are still relevant today because, as you said, they are talking of general principles and laws, which, are kind of time independent and, are valid forever. So, can we say that the Bhagavad Gita is also, talking of such laws of nature?
Yeah, definitely true. That's a very nice way of putting it. It talks about principles. So
Okay.
Bhagavad Gita talks about eternal principles, principles that are forever true.
Now coming to exam preparation, so one way people may make fun of the Gita is by saying that the Gita says that do your work but don't worry about the results. But if we don't worry about the results, how am I going to even study? If I don't care about getting 90% or 95%, why am I even going to work hard to score well in the exams? So
Mm.
what do you say about that?
So often a lot of context is lost in translation. All of us know the famous verse, "Karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana, ma karma phala heturbhuhu ma te sangostva karmani." So within that is very deep philosophy, and it goes back to the same point that you just said about principles. Now we can analyze this verse endlessly, and we probably can do this. I'll just address one common misconception. The word which is used for people who know Hindi is phala or phal. Phal means fruit, and It never says don't have a lakshya. These two are different things. Having an aim and having a fruit are different things. For example, you prepare for the exam. There are multiple levels of aims. One level of aim simply can be I want to score X percentage. A higher aim can be I wish to learn the subject as well as I want.
Right.
A lower aim is I wish to show off to my friends. Now, what Bhagavad Gita is against, and it's not really against, it's actually pointing out a true principle. We can analyze that later. But what it is pointing out is when you make it personal, it actually detracts from the actual performance of the activity. So, for example, everybody knows if you see, for example, Sachin Tendulkar or anybody else, when they get close to a century, many people actually slow down and they start struggling while they were free flowing just before that. Because वो century उनके लिए है, it is for them. For if you see its decimal place, I mean it's 100, in binary it won't look very special. In hexadecimal it won't look very special. But it is an artificial significance given to something. 95, 96, 97 is an artificial significance given to something else, which is supposed to be a metric for learning. Now, if your lakshya is I want to learn, I want to perform to the best in this subject. The phala is teacher bolegi bahut achhe bacche ho, or parents will say very good. That is the phal. What Bhagavad Gita is saying is don't go for the phal. Keep your eyes on the aim. The aim is very clear. And once the aim is clear, you know the sequence of actions that need to be done to reach that aim. And it is even easier to keep your eye on an intermediate aim, which is this is the next action I need to do. This is the next action I need to do. Don't start thinking too far ahead. Not only too far. If you do the right set of actions, the fruit is going to come to you. Nobody else can take it. It will automatically come. If you concentrate only on the next action, after having decided on an aim, if you concentrate on a sequence of actions, that will actually clear your path and you will do better. And this is everybody's experience. You will do better.
So here there are 2 points, which come up. That you said that the phala is the kind of appreciation you may get from your teachers or your parents for having done well in the exam. But the marks, see, one thing is your aim. That okay, you set a target that you want to achieve, let's say 85% or 90% in your exam. That is your target. But after writing the exam, what marks you get, that is also kind of phala by itself, right? Apart from the appreciation that you may get for
Yes, so at that point, so the verbs has 4 parts. Karmanyevadhikaraste. You have a right only to your action. Ma phaleshu kadachana. You never have any rights to the fruits. Okay, we'll come to that. Like I said, we can analyze it endlessly. Third, ma karma phala hetur bhuhu. That comes to the question that you are asking. After the action is over, the fruits came. Do not start thinking that you are completely responsible for the fruits that came. Because next time it actually hurts. Next time you do it, you will start thinking, last time I got 90%, I hope I will get it this time. This hope thing actually kills you. Hope and expectation at the time of doing that action. Like I said, like with Sachin Tendulkar or anybody else, that actually kills you from the next time. Again, I'll go to a cricket example because people are familiar with it. Many people who were so careful till they're 100, immediately after the 100, they will get out. This is basically the third part of the verse. What happens is that marks which come, what Krishna says elsewhere in the Bhagavad Gita is, if you do the sequence of actions properly, that fruit which you deserve is anyway going to come to you. And you are fine in enjoying the fruit at the point of enjoyment. Point is that the reflection of that during the action completely takes away from appropriate action.
So again, you said that if we kind of indulge in it too much, it leads to unnecessary hope and expectation, which does kill the effort. But that also kind of makes you strive harder. No, that you actually, if you expect to score well in your exam, then that kind of motivates you to work hard. Because if you don't expect to do well, then you tend to get demotivated and you give up. Isn't that the case?
That is actually true. So this is where trouble with language starts. So let me try and explain what I'm trying to say. I'm not sure. Most of these things are best practiced, of course. Okay, so when you try it and practice, it works out better. But let's see this. So hope or expectation. We all know, again, I'll give a few examples that everybody is familiar with. When Tendulkar goes there to play, or used to go there to play, or Virat Kohli goes there to play, the clearest, best state of mind for them is a clear state of mind. Nobody will say that I did best because a billion people were shouting and expecting me to score. In fact, everybody feels stressed out. And most people do better when there is no expectation, when nobody is seeing you. Everybody has the habit that I did better if you are playing a musical instrument, that you perform better at home than you perform actually in the arena. Okay, because the weight of expectations of other people, including yourself, is not there. It's a subtle balance like bicycling. It can be taught only in practice. What happens is that motivation, again, we might talk about this later. Motivation using a number is a short-term game.
Right.
So we have these three games, and you should use things appropriately. This is what Bhagavad Gita calls gunatita. Okay, so you have these three things. You can motivate yourself by saying, that day that man insulted me, I will show him. Nothing wrong with it. Krishna himself uses that tactic. The second thing is, I will do so well and I'll make a lot of money, or I'll be the top of my class. This is the second level. Third level is, I just wish to learn. This is a third level. The fourth level is, I will use whichever one of these is appropriate to the situation.
Right.
Right? So any one of these is short-lived. All of us know it. Like a sudden boost. And as much as it boosts you up, it will pull you down.
Right.
And that's where you have to be careful. If you need it, and if you are very consciously using that, it's okay. Like a knife, like a surgeon's scalpel, you have to be very careful.
Right.
And
So here the example that you gave of Tendulkar, I think I'm reminded. I have been a cricket fan all my life till the match fixing scandal. So in many of these interviews of Tendulkar, and I think most of these great batsmen, I think one thing all of them say, which is in common and which is in line again with what we're discussing, is that they take one ball at a time. So if you think about that I am going to score 100 runs in 10 overs or whatever, then that totally spoils the game. But if you actually take one ball at a time, that okay, I want to do the best with this particular ball, and then the next, and then the next.
correct.
So that slowly that builds up into a century or.
That's right. So that's basically the same point. Your overall lakshya might be to win the match. You break it down, and you might even get appreciation.
Right.
You might get a better contract. Now you start wondering about all that
Right.
while playing. It's actually demotivating, because each time you miss it,
Yes.
you will feel that goal is slipping away.
Yes.
Whereas your job is to execute the next step. In the exam, the next question, the next word, the next calculation, every single thing.
Yeah, so we can maybe say it in this way, that that all this people expecting from you and all that may kind of motivate you to walk into the stadium and think of doing very well. But when you're on the pitch and
Yes.
actually doing it, that time you have to forget all of that and
Yes.
just focus on the ball which is coming to you. So again, I think one point which you mentioned, I think, which is very important and very relevant, is that all these various factors have their own role to play and have to be utilized very intelligently. So we cannot just think of it in one single direction in all situations, and different things have their own utility in different situations. Like you said, you gave the example of Krishna also using some of these other tactics to achieve the desired goal.
Mm.
So one point that you mentioned, that is, very interesting, and which I have also been thinking about quite a lot. That you said that the final goal of, exam testing or education system is to improve our learning. But if we also see it from, another, let's say, more, pragmatic perspective, learning is definitely important, but finally, if you do well in your exam, it also takes you to good universities, and that gives you a much better exposure. So there is also that angle to it, that, that, for example, I have had, friends who perhaps, had a great understanding of the subject, but could not score that well in exams, and so could not make it to the, best of institutions. So can we really say that the goal of education and the goal of exams is mainly to promote and test learning?
Okay, so there are two things, as I understand it. What the goal of education and what the goal of the educational system and what the goal of the exam is irrelevant. The point is, how do you wish to use it?
Right.
Okay, so the goal of the educational system, even though I am an educationalist, yeah, I am also a faculty member, you are also a faculty member. We know that the system is not really geared towards education. This is not the most effective or the efficient system you could think of if you wish to impart education. It's the same truth with schools and the same truth with internet, everything.
Right.
Exam again is not meant for definitely maximizing learning. No. But you can utilize the exam system to maximize your learning. You can utilize the educational system to maximize your learning. The question really is, and this is the question that Krishna also poses, what are you using it for? Now, many of the people listening to this might be familiar with the Arjuna story, where he practices in the night
Right. Right.
to hit the target. Now, what is the purpose of the night? If we ask that question, the purpose of the night is to sleep. He utilized it, and he utilized it in a very intelligent way. In the night, I can't see.
Right.
So let me practice my art of archery in the night, because that will let me do archery while I can't see. Right? That is dedication to the art. Now you are interested in physics, and this is again where the centrality of Karmanyavadhikarasthe comes. So once you're interested in physics, you will use everything and anything possible
Right.
to learn physics,
Right.
including the exam, regardless of whether the exam is fair, unfair, whether the marks they are giving is correct, incorrect. Now, if the teacher, and many of us have had this experience in school, we have written the right answer, but we get the wrong response. Wrong response either verbally or they actually put incorrect in our paper.
Right.
It's an exercise in learning something else. How do I communicate more effectively?
Right. Right.
How do I convince people who have different opinions from me? Life is a learning game. You
Right.
can learn so many things if you are, again, this is why, like I said, if you are divested from the particular fruit you wish to get. And the catch is, the reason why man, in some sense, is above the animals, or we have so much progress while animals don't, is we learn, animals don't.
Right.
A lion can, an elephant which was fooled in this way thousands of years ago can still be fooled by in the same way. It cannot do intergenerational learning. Human beings can, though we don't utilize it. If we can, then we use exams that way. That's about it. You have to be very selfish in some sense. You have to be very self-driven, self-motivated to say, okay, this is why I want it. I will use it this way, regardless of why they are giving it.
Right. So here, we see a lot of students, and, for example, the example of cricket that we have been discussing, we see a lot of people successful in, many of these fields. If we take exam in a general way, in every field, people have to write or give exams in the given context. And many of them are successful without having, read the Gita or having, known any of its principles. So then, how does reading or learning the Gita help? If I can do well even without bothering about its teachings, why do I need to, bother about learning this very complicated subject?
To answer this, I am not insisting that people read the Gita in order to succeed in exams. It will help. Just this one idea. In fact, it is my belief that two, three verses that personally hit you, being practiced till the end of your life, they are more than sufficient for almost every need of your life. The only reason why we read Bhagavad Gita is one, of course, people have religious inclinations towards it. It addresses, in my opinion, in a very comprehensive way, every sort of psychological problem that you might ever face. So it's life education. So, and exams are a small, very minuscule part of life. Sometimes, if something else happens in your life, it can affect your exams. A settled mind is of tremendous importance to everybody, from a student till a CEO, okay, to Narendra Modi ji, to anybody else, to a soldier. Everybody it is useful. Nobody can say that I would like a disturbed mind. That is not a goal of everybody. So Bhagavad Gita is, as you know from the very first chapter, the first chapter's name is Arjuna Vishad Yoga, the yoga of Arjuna's sorrow. If you are in sorrow of any sort whatsoever, Bhagavad Gita is helpful for you. As far as students go, all they need to do is to understand where to keep their attention. See, the mind goes everywhere.
Right.
Where to keep their attention. Sometimes reinforcement is good. So reading a few verses of the Gita, maybe even one verse, whatever they find inspirational, is useful. So to that extent, Bhagavad Gita is useful. It has further purposes, but for this purpose, definitely.
This reminds me of a advice which I got from one of my uncles many years back. He said that maybe 2-3 decades back, it was sufficient to make your own mistakes and learn from them. But in today's age of fast pace and fast progress, we have to learn from others' mistakes also. and I think the Bhagavad Gita becomes very relevant in that context. That of course I don't need to read it. I can learn the right way on my own and figure things out on my own. But if there is somebody else who has gone through similar situations and perhaps made similar mistakes, there is no harm in learning from their experience also,
Correct.
which will kind of speed up my own progress. What I may have taken 20-30 years to learn, maybe I can learn that in a year or two, which
Correct.
is definitely a big saving in this age of extremely fast change and extremely fast progress. So you also mentioned that there are three verses which you think are sufficient.
No, I'm saying any three. I'm
Huh?
saying any three that people find relevant.
Yeah. So which three would you?
No, so that would be very personal, but I can tell, of course, Karmanyevadhikaraste is a very simple one. Then there is one which is, again, second chapter 40 or 41. Vyavasayatmika buddhihi ekaiha kurunandana bahushakha hyanantascha buddhayo avyavasayinam. Basically, a person who is successful, जिसको सिद्धि मिलती है, that person has one pointed focus. If you try to do too many things, now this has very deep implications, so I am just giving the implication that is useful to people writing an exam. Focus is of exceeding importance in success in any endeavor. People who have branches of concentrations, or as somebody joked in some book, priorities. The word priorities itself is wrong. You can only have a priority, one. Like you can't have priorities. So as a student,
Right.
it is to master learning.
Right.
If you have that attitude, that is the seed of success of any sort.
Right.
So vyavasayatmika buddhi ekeha, ek. You should have one focus. So you can't be trying multiple things,
Right.
or have multiple things, priorities. To have one, succeed there. Then there is yogastha kuru karmani sangam tyakva Dhananjaya, Siddhya Siddhyo Samo Bhutva Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. What does yoga mean? Yoga means equanimity in success and in failure. Okay, because that's what you cannot wait for external motivation, you cannot wait for external demotivation. The world will give you both. There is no one on earth, including so-called avatars, who have not had ups and downs.
Yes.
Including avatars in every religion, there is no one who has not had failure, who has not had disappointments. Equanimity comes from objectively analyzing it from the outside.
Right.
What went wrong? What can I do better? That is yoga.
Yeah.
Equanimity in action is yoga. When it comes even in the midst of action, then you reach the state of yoga. So these three are my personal favorites.
It's actually very interesting because all these three verses which you mentioned are not only related but extremely relevant to our particular discussion.
Yes.
The first one which you mentioned, talks about not worrying too much about the results. So, focus on the work at hand, which we discussed so far. The second one, as you pointed, talks about one-pointed focus. So when you are preparing for an exam, you don't worry about the results, but you have to focus on your aim and your subject. That focus is extremely important. The third one is even more relevant because even after having worked too hard, there may be many other factors which you also mentioned earlier, which may still lead to failure, or even if it is not total failure, but you may not get results as you expected, and there you have to be equanimous, because the results are not really in your hand, and this concept of being a sthita pragya, that is sometimes perhaps more relevant than this idea of enlightenment that we tend to harp on too much. Whether somebody is enlightened or not, perhaps we can't know, but the sthita pragya can be at least in at least even in an ordinary sense, we can get a sense of whether a person is equanimous in his practical life or not.
Correct.
Yes, yeah, I would definitely agree with you that these three are perhaps the most relevant of the verses in the Bhagavad Gita when it comes to students, or when it comes to others. So now, if a student, let's say, understands this idea and wants to learn the Bhagavad Gita, where does he or she go to? What would be a good source to learn the subject in a meaningful way? So, is there something that students can start out with? Something.
I would recommend, there are multiple by Ramakrishna Math. I think Swami Chinmayananda has also written. Sri Aurobindo has written, but it takes a lot to extract anything from
Yeah, he's another level altogether.
It is even less. It takes even further commitment, and he takes a very spiritual take on the whole thing. These two I can recommend. Chinmaya Ashram has several books. Swami Chinmayananda especially writes very simply.
So students who are interested in learning more, please do check out the description box below for all the links to meaningful resources which you can learn from. So Balaji, very interesting conversation. So can you list out maybe a couple of most important points from this conversation that you would like students to take away?
Yeah, sure. So I would repeat the three verses that I said earlier. Those are, like you rightly pointed out, the simplest and central ideas. The first idea, and I'll just say it chronologically as it appears in the Gita, first idea is that of focus. Okay, so you cannot get anywhere without focus, especially at this age. You need focus. Focus requires an aim. You cannot focus aimlessly. It's basically antithetical. You require a purpose. Have a strong sense of purpose. Please understand that the world is impersonal. Nobody is for you or against you. If you are focused, you can get what you wish to get. Second step, once you have set an aim, please break it down, and at each step, as small a bit of pieces as possible, and then only focus on the actions that will get you there. Okay, and use that as feedback rather than thinking about grand things that I'll be a great person. Think about only small things. Execute those things ruthlessly. That is the second thing. Do not worry about the grand aim; it will automatically come. When it has to come, it will come. The fruit that you deserve will automatically come to you. The third thing is be equanimous. Try to get equanimity as much as possible. All of us get, perturbed now and then, every time, but try to bring yourself back to samatva, back to equanimity, whether you succeed or whether you fail. That's what actually makes sure that you will go back into the cycle of trying new things. If anything can perturb you and you fall, when somebody falls from a bicycle or falls, they don't stay there forever. Automatically, you have to get up. It's the same with the mind. The mind will fall. You just have to train it to come back up again. Once it comes back up, and slowly it will learn balance. So aim for further and further balance. That is the yoga for a student. So that's what is most important for a student. This is all that I have to say for now.
Very interesting. Many thanks, Balaji, for this very, very interesting conversation. I'm sure there is a lot that students can take away and learn from. And many thanks to all the viewers for watching this conversation. If you enjoyed watching it, please do share it with your friends who may also benefit from these ideas. And please do subscribe to our channel. So in the next conversation, we'll bring you another topic which will be relevant to your life in general. Till then, goodbye. Take care.